Thank you for clapping for that video, because I am not Tony Hawk. Clearly. Hi, everyone. My name's Adam Wilson. I get the honor of introducing my partner in a company we co-founded called Decal. I do want to do a quick warm-up, see how this goes over. If you had a childhood hero, no, I'm sorry. If you were 10 years old once, raise your hand. Everyone should be participating. If you had a childhood hero at around that age, like pinup poster, like crazy about them, had to have everything that their name was on, keep your hands up. Come on, guys, I'm trying to. All right, here we go. If you had a childhood hero, keep your hand up. All right. If to this day you still find them relevant and they excite you and maybe they've achieved brand status, keep your hand up. It's difficult to do. So as a 10-year-old skateboarder in 1984, our heroes as skateboarders, they were enigmas. We didn't go on Instagram to see what they ate that night. They were these mystical creatures from a faraway land called Southern California, and none of the kids I grew up skateboarding with in Detroit, the Detroit area, had ever set foot in Southern California. Hell, Southern California may have not have been real. But the only proof we had were magazines that seemed to come out every 30 years, and then VHS tapes, and the joke for some of you skateboarders here, we literally had to search for Animal Chin because there was only one copy of it in our neighborhood. And then, all of that, to us, Tony, we didn't know it at the time, but he was a niche brand. He had all the components of a cult brand before the rest of the world took notice. And then the rest of the world took notice of him in particular. And that's the interesting thing, is it's one thing to build an enduring brand, a culturally relevant brand, all the things we want our brands to be, or to be one. It's quite another to do it at scale, consistently, over time, adapting. And that is what Tony has done. Whether he wants to be a brand or not, he has become one. So if Tony's a brand, all of us marketers in the world are very lucky to have him here today. That'll be my humble brag for him. Because if he is a brand, it kind of takes one to know one, as the old adage goes. So I will stop talking, and let's welcome Mr. Tony Hawk to the stage.
Hi everybody, how are you? My name is Tony Hawk. I'm a professional skateboarder and I'm 50 years old. And welcome to my recovery group for skateboard addicts. No, really, that is still my job title. I've been skating for a long time, and I guess I have become a brand of sorts. I'm still not entirely comfortable with that label, but I understand it, and I've come to accept it and hopefully to keep it going. So a little bit about how I got here. I started skateboarding when I was 9 years old. I lived in San Diego, California, and skating was just a thing that kids did at my age. It was sort of, I didn't realize at the time, but it was sort of on the way out of being cool or popular, much like the yo-yo or the hula hoop. And I started doing it because my older brother was a surfer. He started skating. He let me use his old board. I remember one day in the driveway, he was skating around the alley, and I said, "Can I ride your old board?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And so I got on it. I pushed off, and I remember saying, "How do I turn? How do I turn? How do I turn?" I ran into the fence, and I got splinters in my hands. And he's like, "Just lean." I said, "Oh," and I picked it up, turned it around, and went back on my way. And there was no epiphany. The clouds didn't part. I didn't really think much of it. It was just a thing that we did. Like my friends were doing it, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna skateboard with my friends." Not long after that, I got invited to go to the local skate park with a friend of mine who was going with his mom, and my parents filled out all the forms. And I went, and when I walked into the skate park, I literally saw people flying out of pools. And that's when I had my epiphany. I was like, I want to do that. Whatever that is, however you get there, I want to do it. I was super scrawny. I used to play baseball and basketball. I was always very frustrated that I couldn't accomplish the things that I knew I was capable of, or that I couldn't do the things that the team relied on me for because of my size, not because of my abilities. And when I got skateboarding, it was much of the same. All of the experienced skaters were much older. They were 5 or 6 years older than me. They looked like grown-ass men. I started trying it and just was like, I'm hooked. I'm going to do this for as long as I can. I'd say 2 concussions and 2 knocked out teeth later, I learned how to fly a little bit out of the bowl. And then I went through not long after that, I quit playing other sports. I quit Little League the year that they appointed my dad president of Little League. That was an awkward conversation to have. But he was supportive, believe it or not. I really did. I got lucky because most of my friends' parents did not want them skating. Skating was a negative influence. The outcasts, the bad kids, the punkers, they all skated. And I fell in love with it because of those things, because it set me apart, because it made it that I didn't have to follow this path that all my friends seemed to be stuck on. That was like, play Little League, play basketball, then you go to school, and you go to college, and then you find what you want to do. And I don't want to dismiss any of that, but it just didn't seem like it was for me. And so when I chose skating, I didn't think I was choosing a future. The absolute best skaters in the world at the time, they got their equipment for free, and they got their picture in a magazine, maybe. So I didn't really think I was choosing a career. I was really young, too. But I started to make a name for myself because I was doing these really strange tricks with my skateboard where I was maneuvering it, and they were all very, I hate to say technical because they seem really basic now in hindsight, but they were very technical in comparison to the way people were skating. Everyone was trying to emulate surfing at the time. So it was like, if you looked like you were surfing, you're doing laybacks and you're doing airs, that was cool. If you were reaching down between your legs and spinning your board around, that was not cool. That's what I did. And it was very isolating because I found the sport I loved that was already an outcast activity. It was considered, for more rebellious kids. And then I fell in love with it, and then my style was largely chastised. So then I was like isolated in my little community, and it was very hard. It was hard to get any validation. It was hard to get any acceptance. I found a couple friends that were my age that kind of had the same attitude, kind of had the same body type, because we didn't have the bulk to propel us in the air. So I developed a style of getting airborne where I would, it's so strange now to be in an audience like this and say that I ollied into my aerials and have it make sense to you. Because it probably does in a little bit and in a way. And through my life, that was not the case. But I learned how to ollie into my aerials and grab. And that way I was already in the air by the time I was doing the maneuver. And there were pros literally interviewed in the magazines where they're like, what do you think of that kid, Tony Hawk? Because I started to make some noise in the amateur ranks. And they're like, he just cheats. He just ollies into his airs and he can grab it however. And I was like, yeah, that's the point. I can grab it however I want. I'm not gonna early grab a stale fish coming up the bowl because it's just not functional. Sorry, I went a little nerdy on that. But that was it. And so they were starting to kind of make fun of me. But around that time, I started to grow a little bit and get more strength, and my aerials were getting much higher, and the technical moves I was doing were getting more spectacular or more airborne. And it was more like they couldn't deny that what I was doing is something different and something that made sense. I started to reach the top of the amateur ranks, and suddenly I found myself, my peers were starting to go pro, and I was met with a decision at this one event. I'll never forget the Whittier turkey shoot in 1982, where I'm filling out the entry form to the competition, and there's a box that says amateur and there's a box that says pro. And that was pro. That was it. There was no, there was no contract. There was no celebration. There was no signature model. I just moved up in the ranks, and I was competing against guys much older than me, guys who I'd looked up to half of my life, and I was competing for $100 first prize. So it was awesome. I loved it. And I ended up getting 4th place at that event, which was huge. I actually beat one of the pros that at one point in my life literally spit on my skateboard because I tried to sidle up to him because I wanted him to acknowledge me. And he spit on my board and said, "This is punk rock, kid." I was like, all right, I'll go back over here. And so my big claim to fame was that I beat him at my first event, my first pro event. It was awesome because it was just we did it because we loved it. It was such a small community. No one was making a living at it. And suddenly we found ourselves with a little bit of recognition and for me, validation. And I started to do really well in the competitions. All of a sudden, skateboarding sort of came back into fashion. And in the mid-'80s, I found myself, what I thought, riding high. I was making almost 6 figures a year. I was 17. I bought a house when I was a senior in high school. Try getting to school on time your senior year when you own your own house and your parents are never home. Like, where's the party? Well, Tony's parents are never home. Party's at Tony's house. And suddenly I found myself making a really good living. I was about to graduate high school. All of my friends were trying to figure out where they're going to go to college. And I had this realization that I have a career. I don't know how far I can take it. And for, at my age, there was no end in sight. The sky was never falling. This is going forever. So I just chased it. And for the first few years of that, after I graduated high school, it was going nonstop. We were on tour half the year, traveling the world, getting paid, doing big demos for what we thought was thousands of people, maybe hundreds, but it just felt huge, and we felt invincible. Not long after that, around 1991, suddenly the sky did fall, and the bottom dropped out of skateboarding. Most of the skate parks at the time couldn't afford insurance, so they all were closing left and right. Skateboarding was not cool anymore, and I was stuck with 2 mortgages, a child on the way, and not having any idea what I was doing. I was 24. And suddenly I was like, what do I do with my life? I thought this defined me, the skating. I love it. I have to do. So at the time, I did what seemed like the smartest decision was to take a second mortgage out on my house and start a skateboard company. And I did that because I thought that was my transition from being a pro skater and more just being behind the scenes and having a brand of my own that I could control, that I chose the riders for, that I chose the direction for, I chose the aesthetics, and it was fun. It was experimental. It was tricky financially, but that wasn't the point. Like, we loved what we were doing. I would take my crew on tour, and we would go. One of our first tours, we took the delivery van that we used for Birdhouse that was on its way out in terms of dying. And there were 5 of us at a time, sometimes 6. No, there were 6 of us in the van, and we're driving across the country. We would go to skate shops, and we would just show up and hope that they would give us $400 so that we could get a hotel room, get food, get gas, and get to the next place. About half the time, they gave us part of $400. And it was a blast, though, because we would go to these parking lots, and they would just set up some junky wooden ramps. The local skaters would come and either skate with us or just watch. We went to a couple of the last remaining skate parks across the country. If you want to know how you share one room with 6 dudes, you take the mattresses off the box springs, and you put them to the side so that 2 people get a mattress, 1 person gets box springs, 2 mattress, 1 box spring. We were living the dream. And it's funny because when I look back on that, I don't think of it as a struggle. It was like I said, it was tricky financially, but but we just loved it so much, and we loved that we were still able to skate for a living. Even though it was a minor living, we were doing what we love for a living, and that was it. Not long after that, it took about 2 or 3 years for us to actually turn a profit at Birdhouse. That was my skate company. But we stayed the course. We cut costs at every turn. Those years, I was living on a steady diet of Taco Bell and Top Ramen. That's totally true. And I still eat it once in a while. We were just making it work. Luckily, I had a team that believed in our vision, and they stuck with us, even though they weren't making that much money either. And suddenly, I got a call from ESPN, and they said, hey, we're going to do a competition that includes skateboarding. It's called the Extreme Games, and we want to get some of the top competitors, and we heard you're not competing, but we're going to have a vert ramp, and so you might want to join us, because there were very few vert ramps at the time. That was more my style. And I realized that they were giving us this platform, this opportunity to show what we do on to a bigger audience. It was a mishmash. It was an experiment. They're throwing everything against the wall. They had bungee jumping, rock climbing, sky surfing, eco challenge. It was all over the place. But I felt like we had come so far as skaters and refined our styles and refined our tricks that we would kind of shine through the noise. That's what I believe. So I went for it. I ended up sort of becoming one of the main names that emerged from that time because I was still competing and doing well. And then the X Games started to get bigger. They started to lose some of the noise, trim the fat, so to speak. No more bungee jumping. And suddenly it became the main event for kids to watch on TV, 1997, 98-ish. Around the same time, and I was going full speed ahead, skating as much as I could, touring, doing promotions, doing the most random promotions. I did a demo. I remember the one time I got offered big money, and then I realized that I didn't really want to follow this path anymore. I got offered to do a promotion for Fruit Loops. Me and Matt Hoffman, BMX rider, and at the time Johnny Mosley, who had just won the Olympics. And they said, we want you guys to do this promotion for, I think it was, the idea was that Toucan Sam is now an extreme athlete. And we had a whole media training session for us to answer questions as if Toucan Sam was a real person, and he's really into our sports now. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do this kind of thing for money. This is not my scene. We ended up, the three of us kind of having fun with it. We did a demo. Johnny Mosley was on the mic announcing us doing tricks. He didn't know any skate tricks, so he started naming them after cereals. He's like, there's a Special K, there's Frosted Flakes, and then they told him he had to stop because they weren't actually their brands. So I do remember around that time is when I actually did get an agent, and I told him, I don't want to do this kind of thing. I want to have control over the endorsements I do and at least have more control over my likeness and my brand. I didn't say brand because I didn't know that's what it was back then. But right around that time, I got a call by a PC developer who said, hey, I want to work on a skateboard game. I know you're into video games. And we could go pitch this to developers. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And he had a very rudimentary engine of this guy that was sort of carving through pools and doing little tricks, and it had a long way to go. But I agreed to go pitch, and he and I went and pitched all kinds of developers and console manufacturers, and came up against a lot of pushback. One in particular rhymes with Pidway. They said, well, skateboarding is not even popular. Why would anyone want to play a video game after skateboarding? I was like, well, I think it lends itself to more open architecture and free skating and sort of whatever. I did my pitch. He wasn't hearing it. We left. Finally, that guy got too discouraged. He said, look, I got to go make a living somehow. He said, but I think that the seed is planted that you're interested in a video game and that you might get a call. About 2 years go by, and then maybe a year, and then Activision called me and they said, hey, we are doing a video game, and we would love to have your input on it and maybe add your name to it. And so I drove up to Santa Monica and met with a bunch of corporate suits all standing around this meeting table with a PlayStation in front of them. And I walked in, they're like, well, this is what we're working on. Do you want to see it? Yeah. So they turn it on, and on the screen is Bruce Willis with a gun strapped to his back on a skateboard going through a wasteland and doing ollies and kickflips. And the reason for that is that they had just worked on a game called Apocalypse that starred Bruce Willis that was a complete failure. But the engine they developed was perfect for skating. And when I held this in my hands and I started playing it, I knew instinctively that this was it. This was the right feeling. This was the right control scheme. And with my input, with my resources, we could make something that skaters would be inspired to buy a PlayStation for. That was the goal for me. For me, if I got a skater to go buy the game and buy a PlayStation and start playing it, it was like, that's it, my job's done. That's success. As we started to finish the development of it, you could feel that there was a buzz. I started burning copies for my friends illegally. And we all had these modified PlayStations, so I started sending it to people that I knew were into video games. And the buzz around the skate industry was, have you guys played the game? The game. That's just what it was known as before it was even released. And then Activision called me and they said, hey, I think we're getting a lot of buzz from the game. We'd like to offer you a buyout on future royalties for $500,000. And I never heard anyone speak $500,000 to me. It sounded like a gazillion billion dollars. But I was in a position, I just sort of got some financial security with other projects. I just bought a new house, and I was like, no, I think I want to let it ride. I would love to see how this plays out. It was by far the best financial decision of my life. And the game took off. It went to all kinds of sequels. I'm sure many of you know about it. And it really changed my life. in terms of recognition, in terms of opportunity, parents were telling me that their kids were wondering why I was named after a video game. And that's when I realized that I'd become a brand. That was the moment. When I first heard that, it was like, oh, this is totally different level of recognition and opportunity. And suddenly, I have become a brand, and with great power. But really, it was kind of intimidating. But at the same time, it opened up all kinds of new doors. It allowed me to exit competition, because that was my main source of income at the time, and start to follow projects that I really wanted to do. Things like the Boom Boom Huck Jam, which was an arena tour of action sports. A lot of different endorsements, and even soundtracks to our video games. And those kind of things wouldn't happen without that level of recognition. I mean, that was definitely, for me, the tipping point. Soon after that, I discovered social media through Twitter, and I started to realize how immediate and direct the connection was to fans in those platforms. And this is early on in Twitter days. I got a little boost from Lance Armstrong. I think this is the plan that was seed. And then I just would watch the information flying around, and I thought, this is crazy. And so one day I'm driving to my office, and I planted a skateboard off this one street behind a fire hydrant. I just said, hey, I just put a skateboard on the street, go find it, to see what would happen. By the time that I got to my office, someone had tweeted a photo of them holding the board, and all kinds of other people saying, oh, I just missed it, I just got there. And a friend of mine actually went, I don't know why. I could have given him a board. A friend of mine went there because he was nearby, and he said, I saw at least 20 cars pulling in, trying to find this thing. And I just thought, wow, this is something that I never imagined, and I embraced it fully. We ended up doing Twitter hunts back then, and then through the other obvious social media, Facebook and Instagram, and suddenly I found that there was this whole new world of being connected. But also I felt a responsibility to at least stay interesting on those platforms, because I saw plenty of my friends and even brands that were just boring. And I think that there's a lesson there in that obviously you don't have to be a person to be a brand, but your brand has to have personality on those platforms. And when you're just tweeting or putting on Instagram, your pitch lines and stuff like that, people it's gone. And now with the algorithms, it's just buried forever. And so I think, if I had any advice in that category, it's just try to stay interesting, try to stay engaging, try to get people to be talking to you. I find myself in the strangest situations, and I just take a photo, and that in itself usually works because it's such an absurd life that I get to live. With skateboarding, I never imagined that I would get to do this for a living. I never imagined that I would get to do this at my age, and it's the kind of thing that I would do gladly for free any day of the week. And now I get paid ridiculous amounts to do that. Now I get paid ridiculous amounts to speak about doing that. And it's just, it's a dream come true, but at the same time, it's a dream that we've created along the way because there was no guidebook to this. This was all just us trying to figure it out and enjoying it. And I think that shined through our true enjoyment of what we do. I'm not just talking about for myself, I'm talking about like professional skateboarders in general, especially my generation. A lot of them are still skating. The Bones Brigade, like Adam was talking about, all those guys, we still skate together. We're in our 50s. It's crazy. And I even have been able to learn some new tricks at my age, believe it or not. They're not high impact, they're not record breaking, but for me it's progressive and I enjoy it. And I still want to, if I'm going to live this life and promote these brands and still have sponsors, I got to walk the walk. But that's not why I do it. I do it truly for the love of the sport. And it's just been, it's been a wild ride. And I just want to thank you for having me and letting me tell my story because here we are. It brought us here in Banff. I got to go to the Delirium dive today and risk my life. And this is crazy. To be here now talking to you. So thank you very much, and we'll answer some questions.
Thank you. It's a true honor to have you here, and I said backstage, you deserve it too, and you truly are a brand. I know it's probably uncomfortable. I'm like zero famous, and you're 1,000, and even walking through here, because we put this conference on, people stop me everywhere, and I can't imagine you. I saw you on Casey Neistat's show.
Oh, yeah.
And people on the street grabbing you, and is that tough? Does it get tiring?
No, it's awesome. It's super fun. I mean, usually people are very excited. It's not like you're some polarizing figure that they have great opinions about. It's like, oh man, Tony Hawk, yeah, Tony Hawk Underground. Yes. High five. Right. It's kind of like that.
Almost 20, I guess it's 20 years ago. X Games 1999. The 900. Let's roll it.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, look at this. Tony Hawk.
I wanted to stop on that picture. Honestly, it's 20 years ago, and I know it's probably close to impossible. When you look at that, what is that moment for you?
It's very. I wasn't trying to hide anything. It was a state of shock. I had been trying that trick for nearly 10 years up to that point, off and on, and it was something I had never pursued a trick so passionately for so long. But I think the more shock in that face is that so many people were excited to see it. Because
live too.
Because when I learned, well, for instance, I'd learned 720s, which is a double spin, on a backyard ramp outside of Stockholm, Sweden in 1985 to 3 people watching. And I was like, oh, that's new. That was it. Yeah. So to have this much attention on the next spin was really surreal to me, and to have all my peers there cheering me on too.
Yeah, and
but
your
also
competition.
I think that speaks to the camaraderie of skateboarding, in that we're all competing, we're in this best trick event, we're all, it's supposed to be neck and neck, and they see that I'm getting closer to this finally, And they started supporting me in that, and I'm sure that was a big reason I did it. Well, I was either going to do it or get taken away in the hospital.
It was
Taken
amazing.
in an
How
ambulance.
many times did you fall?
Hundreds?
No, but on that
night?
it was
I think 11 or 12 or something.
crazy. It's crazy. Another feeling that I don't have the image, but when was the first time The Simpsons called you?
Ha!
Because you've kind of made it when you're in a Simpsons episode. You've been in multiple episodes.
No, just one.
Just one, okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
That actually, I have to credit my publicist for chasing that, Sarah Hall Productions. I think she was doing that behind the scenes. And at some point I got the call and they said they want to feature you in an episode. They actually want the episode to be centered around you because you're going to be the surrogate father for Bart.
It's amazing. And did you go there? Like, did you record?
Yeah. The coolest part about that whole process was going to the table read and seeing the voice come out of the most unlikely people around the table.
Take me through that.
It was amazing. And people still say, like, what's the highlight or what's the coolest thing you've done? That is by far the coolest thing I've done because it's such a gauge on pop culture.
I know. It's crazy. We should have Bart Simpson here one year. Who inspired you back in those days? 2 questions. Who inspired you? Who did you look up to? And then who inspires you now?
I think my original inspiration for at least learning how to skate pools was Steve Caballero because he was about the same size as me, and I would see him in magazines flying out of pools with elbow pads on his knees because he was so small. And that's what I wore, and I was like, I want to do that. That guy can fly. And then later on, it was a skater named Eddie Alguera who, in his time, was absolutely the most innovative skater at a time when skateboarding was at its ultimate lull. And so he was right place, wrong time. But I was watching him, and my first pro trick that I learned, I'll never forget, I wanted to learn frontside rock and rolls. He created that trick. And because I could do that as a unsponsored amateur, they moved me up in the ranks because they said, if anyone can do frontside rocks, they have to be in the expert division. And I couldn't do much else.
How long did it take you to learn it?
It didn't take that long. It just wasn't that no one else was really focused on that. Everyone else was still trying to fit into the style and the air thing.
Do you feel like, because I heard you talk about sport, art, like you're the GOAT when it comes to skateboarding? Do you agree? It's true. But did you?
But it truly, I think, that's hard to say. Like skateboarding is such an art form as far as I'm concerned. It's such a lifestyle. You can't have someone that is the best. I mean, it's like comparing
you definitely are.
artists.
But I appreciate the humility. But my question is, do you feel like your athletic ability, or was it the art? Like, did you feel like you caught the tricks fast, or you got them and picked them up fast because you saw it in your mind first? Like, or did you feel like you're gifted?
I think I was always driven to challenge myself. And so I didn't care about my accolades. I didn't really care about my contest placings. I just wanted to keep learning new tricks. And that was the buzz for me and the thing I was chasing. So because I stayed progressive through those years, even though I was ranked #1, that's what kept me going.
So back to Casey's, and maybe talk about new media, because you did Casey's podcast, what was it, a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, it was a month or 2 ago, yeah.
So you've been around the game, and they're more, Casey Neistat, for those who don't know, is a YouTuber. They have more media power than the CNN or that. What was it like being with him, and this isn't an interview about him, but he wanted to have you on the show, and he's kind of influencing culture. What was it like being there, and what did that mean?
It was interesting. It really showed the value of the new technology and those who have harnessed it and gotten the traction in it, because that in itself, he was a very early adopter, especially of YouTube and doing vlogs or whatever you want to call it. I didn't really know much about him. We had a mutual friend. That's how we linked up. But I do remember watching him because he did a thing where he flew first class on United Emirates.
Yeah.
And crazy. I was like, that is fucking cool.
Yeah.
That he videoed every part of it to show the world what it's like, because it's such a mystery and such an infamous. Yeah. I don't know if anyone knows about it, but for a while, Emirates was like the most luxurious airline.
That's like $30,000 for
something like that. Yeah.
Crazy, yeah.
And so he took it upon himself to just film the whole experience. I was like, that's
cool to see you on
great,
there.
Yeah. And so when I told him my my mobile game was coming out. He said, oh man, I want to build a mini ramp. That'll give me an excuse in New York. So we set a date, and I got there, and he said, I can't build a mini ramp. It's going to break through the whole floor. He's in Manhattan. He's like in the middle of Manhattan. It's pretty ambitious.
I played the game. I'm not that good at it yet, but I downloaded it when I saw it on the show.
See, it worked.
Yeah, let's talk about rivals.
You're the demographic.
Larry Bird and Magic Johnson in basketball. Who was yours? Because I know you had rivals. The guy that spit on your board, I'm not sure if he was one of them. But how did rivals play into shaping the Tony Hawk we know? And who were they? Rivals, people that
rivals. Oh,
maybe didn't.
Well, I've been through a couple generations of skating, so take your pick. I think early on, people pitted me against Christian Hosoi because Christian represented the cool factor and the style of skating, and I represented the tricks and in a lot of ways like the robotics of it. And it was like you were in one camp or the other. That was it, especially through the 80s. I mean, it didn't get heated for us. We had grown up skating together, but it got weird at contests. Like I would skate and people would throw things at me.
Well, from the outside, it looked like you guys didn't like each other, but behind the scenes.
Oh no! I mean, are you kidding? I would have killed to make my heirs look like him.
Yeah.
He was the king of style. But later on, as the X Games came into play, then they were pitting. It was like me, Bob Burnquist, Andy McDonald, Bucky Lasek. I don't know. I'm super old, so I got lines.
Let's go back pools. Let's talk about pools. In the early days, do you have any good stories about breaking into backyards back in the day and skating empty pools?
Not great stories, but definitely hopping fences and feeling very much like we're going to get in trouble.
That was a thing.
And sometimes getting in trouble. The worst trouble I ever gotten for skating was skating down the boardwalk in Oceanside. And a cop came and got me in a headlock and literally dragged me to the station by the pier to write me a ticket.
How much was the ticket?
I don't know. I sent it to my sponsor.
Yeah. Good idea. Yes, brands, you are useful. Purpose, there's been lots of talk with the brands that we're honoring here, amazing brands, and they're purpose-driven. I know you are. I've seen some of the philanthropy you do. Can you talk about what you do and what you're involved in and why you do it?
The charity closest to my heart, obviously, is my foundation. We help to support public skate parks in low-income areas. And the catalyst for that was in the early 2000s, as our video game was getting successful and the interest in skateboarding was growing, I saw a serious lack of facilities. There was just no place to skate. So these kids that found something that they loved and that they were doing, especially in the more challenged areas, were largely told not to do it or told to get off the streets. And it all came to a head for me when I got invited to a skate park opening out in an affluent neighborhood outside of Chicago. They paid me to show up. And they had built this facility and they were really proud. You know, they were hip, they were cool. They were supporting skateboarding. And we went in there. I went in the night before and they said, do you want to get a sneak preview of the park? Because no one's been able to skate it yet. So I go and they've got this fence around this new skate park and I go skate it and it is so terrible. Like stairs that go to a wall. Every ledge was about this high, so you couldn't even slide it on your skateboard without your wheels dragging. Basically, they said, we're going to do a skate park, and had people bid for the project, and they got a sidewalk contractor with the lowest bid. Didn't know anything about skateboarding. And so I go there, and they're all clamoring, watching me on the fence, like all these city councilmen. And then they said, what do you think? What do you think? And I was like, it's terrible. And they said, oh, well, that's what all the kids were saying when we built it. But we said, wait till Tony Hawk gets here and he'll show you how to ride it. And to me, like, it was funny, but it was also tragic. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this thing. And at that moment, I decided I want to change this tide. I want to do something to at least be a go-between between the city and the kids that are getting this facility, and to, more importantly, direct those funds to more low-income areas. So I didn't know what the mission was exactly, but I just said, I have a voice, I can maybe affect this change. And I got invited at that time to do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Celebrity Edition. And my phone a friend was my brother, who was a literature major, and a literature question came up, and it was for $125,000. I already used all my other ones on whatever, stupid questions. And so it was a Hemingway quote, and this is 2001. So Google is just on the scene, kinda. And so I'm like, oh, he'll know it. So we call up, and he answers the phone. Yeah, okay, this is the quote, and I can hear him typing. And I was like,
Unreal.
I thought you were a literature major, Steve. And then he said, oh, it's Huckleberry Finn. Yep, it's Huckleberry Finn. That's the answer for sure, because he saw it come up a bunch of times on the search. And we got $125,000. I didn't bother trying to answer the next question, and that was the seed money for the foundation. So then we started giving out grants, mostly giving out resources on sort of how to, the best ways to get a skate park done, you know, how to petition the city, how to raise funds, how to get a design. And then we really started to be effective with our work, and now to date we've helped to fund over 600 skate parks.
It's because there's a lot of purpose-driven,
It's really just selfish so that I have more places to skate.
You want to have more places to skate. Yeah, it's like people blame my birthday's on Sunday, and they're like, this is just my big birthday party. How can because there's a lot of purpose-driven brands here, big ones and small ones, and people, how can they get involved with what you're doing? Or how can they get involved?
TonyHawkFoundation.org. I mean, we'd love any support. You can be an advocate. You can be a donor. You can be the catalyst to start one in your city. You know, that's the key to it all. We don't come into a city and say you need a skate park. We empower the groups that are already trying to get the skate park going. That's the model, so that they have ownership of it and pride over it.
Switching gears a bit, you're a partner in agency Decal. Did I say it?
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell me about that? What it's all about, what you're trying to do.
Sure. Well, Adam, who introduced me, was
Shout out,
really
Adam.
the one who started it. So basically, my wife's from Detroit. We have roots in Detroit. We bought a house there. We love the city. We love the growth there. We've done a lot of skating, and I met Adam through some mutual skate friends. Adam got us permission to skate a backyard pool in Detroit. Big points in my book. And he sent me an email that it was really clever. He sent me an email that was disguised as a press release saying that Tony Hawk is starting a marketing agency in Detroit with Adam Wilson, and they're gonna go with purpose-driven brands and use their collective experience. And I was like, that's a good idea. And then we went down the line and got funding and all that, and it took a little bit longer than we expected, but it was Adam's idea, and it's been a blast. I mean, it's been really fun to be on that side of it, because I've been on the other side of marketing agencies that are all by the book, and they're telling me how I should present skateboarding or what I do, and it's really frustrating, and I had to fight for that control all through my years of sponsorship. That's the Fruit Loops.
Yeah, it's
era.
Fruit Loops. Yes. What does make a good partnership for you? Like, because often, even your early days when you get sponsored, that was the big thing. Now the tables, in my opinion, would turn where you can say, choose who you work with. What makes a good brand?
Anything that I feel that I could passionately promote, or that I truly do participate in, or that I think is a good idea. It's never really too far off of what I'm into. So it's just more like the best part about having come this far is that brands do trust me to do promotions in my own voice, especially on social media, because a lot of times they want to control the messaging, and they know that I'm going to have that message in my actual voice, and that's what's important. And so, and that's why I don't let anyone else do my social media. People think that I have some team, like I'm fat Jewish or something.
It's a great Instagram account.
That's not it.
I was gonna play Instagram roulette and just scroll through and say what happened here, but not enough time. We are gonna take questions, but my For some reason, my Twitter isn't opening on my phone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over there because it's not fair. There's lots of people. I'm a fan, but there's super fans here. And so I'm going to stand over there, and we'll take 4 or 5 questions from the audience. I'll just bring the mic over. So now is your chance. You can stay here, Tony, and I'll go over here because then you can look at them. If you want to ask Tony a question, come on up and stand here beside me. Not everyone at once. Come on. Anyone?
Should be in a dunk tank.
Anyone? There we go. Just give us your name and ask the question.
Hi, I'm Sarah. My question is, what brands are doing action or adventure sports well, and any tips for brands that want to get into that area?
Thanks.
I think the big players obviously are like Red Bull, Vans, Patagonia, they're Nike. The way that Nike has marketed skateboarding and really presented it for what it is instead of trying to package it for what they think it is. I have to give them credit because they've come a long way, and they're skateboarding's in the Olympics next year.
Crazy.
And they're supportive of that, and so are the other brands as well.
Thank you. 2 more that I got told. There we go.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Aaron. I wanted you to comment on how you stayed out of trouble. What do you attribute, relatively speaking? Lots of guys sort of fell by the wayside. What do you attribute the difference being for those who didn't?
There was no YouTube in my generation. There was no TMZ when I was growing up. I think it was just more that I was always very focused on the skating because that's what got me there, and I knew that was the priority. And I saw a lot of my peers, once they got a taste of fame or celebrity or money, they really went off the wires. They went off the rails and chased other distractions. And you could see it in their skating that they were losing focus. And I never wanted to do that. And so the sort of nerd in me shined through because of that. In the later years, it's just more because I want to be an example to my own children, and that transcends sometimes what I do for the most part. I never set out to be a role model or anything. It was just more it sort of fell into my lap, and because I had kids, I was able to show hopefully the right way to do things.
That's great. 1 more. 2 more, I guess.
Hey, Tony, I thought you could tell everybody about the time you rode a cardboard skateboard on behalf of a cardboard box company.
I can.
Interesting.
So, yeah, you guys made a skateboard out of cardboard and made a donation to our Tony Hawk Foundation. And I'm not going to lie, it was really heavy and very solid and skatable, but probably not the direction we're going with construction. But I appreciated the experiment.
Yes. All right, last question.
Hi, Tony. It's Mary Charlson. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about what you think about skateboarding in the Olympics and what that's going to mean for the industry. Will it sort of keep it still in its grassroots, or some of the challenges?
I think the challenge is mostly just fitting into all the rules of the Olympics, and I'm more talking about the path to getting into the Olympics and all the organizations involved, and also the international aspect. I feel like skateboarding should have been in the Olympics before snowboarding. It's been around just as long. And so, in my eyes, the summer games need the cool factor that snowboarding brings to their winter games. They need that more than we need their validation. That's always been my attitude, and it might be cavalier, but I do feel like that because it's about time. So many people skate and don't play many of your summer games, summer disciplines. So I think it's a great opportunity. Like, the silver lining of all that is that it's going to be a great opportunity for skateboarding to be seen by a much bigger global audience, and for kids that skate in the most unlikely areas to maybe have support from their government to do what they do and to have facilities and things like that. So I love that aspect of it. All of the politics and sort of the stuff going on behind the scenes, I remove myself from that because I just want to be a fan. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to cash in from the inclusion of skateboarding, because that's just not my directive at all. But it's going to be exciting. I mean, it's happening.
It's unreal. Yeah.
That train is moving.
It's crazy. Last question.
Hey, what's up? I'm Rolly. Wanted to ask you about the soundtracks for the Tony Hawk games, because I honestly feel like they're some of the most influential soundtracks in the history of video games. I feel like it really popularized music licensing in video games, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
So what do you think of the influence of those songs? Because they're like iconic songs now.
The influence for me was that was my soundtrack to the skate parks. And so I wanted to share truly the culture of skating and share the music that I was listening to when I was growing up in those parks, stuff, and it was all very punk driven. And the great part about that and about licensing it for those games was that those bands were excited to get any kind of coverage. So it wasn't like we had to pay them to, and I'm not trying to say like, yeah, we got them. But we didn't really have to pay them much in licensing, and that wasn't really the music industry was still driven by sales back then. So once they got in the game and they got that recognition, a lot of them had a second career, and I was proud of that. And then that opened up even more opportunity for getting more bands. And yeah, I'm hugely proud of sort of bringing the soundtrack to skating to a bigger audience. And it's funny because we're actually working on right now. Well, I'm trying to work on. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater turns 20 this year, and I'm trying to get a THPS themed concert happening that will be a benefit for my foundation. It'd be super cool. And I haven't gotten a lot of traction from the band, surprisingly. So I'm hoping that changes.
It's amazing. Before we wrap up, a couple housekeeping items. I didn't think I'd be doing housekeeping items sitting beside Tony Hawk, but here I am. The reception tonight starts at 7, and the gala starts at 8. We have a Tony Hawk film that'll be playing there, and then all the brands that you've came here to see. We have these short films. It's going to be exciting. Music festival. It kicked off last night, but it kicks into high gear on Friday night, so make sure you have your tickets for that. And registering for 2020, the allotment of tickets we allow every year is running out. There's a few left for 2020 early birds. Go ahead and get them. Tony, real pleasure, man. It's cool to be sitting here. It was a dream of ours 6 years ago to honor the best brands in the world. And it's cool that it's now a person as well. And you deserve it. Thanks for being here. Give him a hand.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.